believe it was a great philosopher and poet once said, "Mama, I'm in love with a criminal."
I can explain.
So, young people openly support terrorism now. This is fine. The kids are not all right. At least not the young adults, age 18 to 29, a plurality of whom now openly support terrorism. I know, that sounds like right-wing hyperbole or fear-mongering or alarmism, but it's not. It's just the reality that we now know thanks to a brand new, incredibly disturbing poll from Emerson College. For context, as you probably know by now, on TikTok and elsewhere on the internet, social media influencers celebrated and even sexualized Luigi Manion, the alleged killer who allegedly murdered in cold blood and in extrajudicial fashion United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Here's a sampling of that in case you forgot how the reaction went down online.
So this is who police believe was responsible for the United Healthcare CEO Pew Pew. His name's Luigi. All I can say is, Mamma mia. Does he need a Mario? I'm kidding. I believe it was a great philosopher and poet once said, "Mama, I'm in love with a criminal. And this type of love isn't rational, it's physical." That was Britney Spears. And I believe we're all feeling that right now. I believe if you're gonna do superhero-like shit, you better look like one, okay? This man clearly did that.
I can explain.
That guy who shot that other guy is really hot. Just saw a photo of his torso online. Luigi, you're so pretty. And I know you're in hot water, but the comments say you're being framed. Luigi, wanna kiss me? And I hope you plead insanity so capitalism's blamed.
This was disturbing, of course, to see people simping for murder, not even caring that somebody should get a trial or anything, just supporting someone being gunned down in the street. But we didn't know how widespread the sentiment was, or whether it was partially meant like as a joke, in jest. Now we do, and the results are really really concerning. So anyway, this new poll from Emerson College surveyed Americans about the murder of Brian Thompson and asked them a simple question. Do you think this was morally acceptable? Even if you think the health insurance industry is incredibly messed up, even if you didn't like Brian Thompson, most people should understand, right, that just killing someone in the street in cold blood with no trial, no due process, because you disagree with the actions they've done as a CEO or whatever, is not okay. But a shocking percentage of young Americans age 18 to 29 actually thought this was perfectly morally acceptable. 41%, a plurality of young people age 18 to 29, told Emerson pollsters that the extrajudicial murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was, quote, acceptable. And about 20% said they were neutral on this question, and only 33% had the common sense to say that the murder was completely unacceptable. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Democratic respondents were much more likely to say they morally approved of the murder, with Republicans significantly less likely, and the sentiment was much more widespread among this young cohort than it was in all the other older age groups. Process these numbers with me for just a moment. A plurality of young people, so not a majority, but the most of any of the options that were available, openly said they support terrorism. Because rest assured, is what this killer, allegedly Luigi Manion, did. The FBI simply defines domestic terrorism as violent criminal acts committed by individuals and or groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influences, such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. Basically, is when you use violence against civilians to further a political agenda, which is exactly what this killer allegedly did. He murdered someone in cold blood because he wanted to send a political message about the healthcare industry in the United States, a message he clearly didn't even understand. He admitted in his manifesto or whatever that he didn't understand it well enough to actually explain it, but said others have, which not great that you don't even fully understand the thing you're using to justify an act of murder, but okay. The alleged shooter has been charged with and some left-wing types are acting surprised or horrified by this, but to me it seems entirely appropriate. What he did is the textbook definition of domestic terrorism. So when these young people say, 41% of them, that they think this murder is morally acceptable, what they're saying is that, at least in this instance, they support terrorism openly and proudly. It's really hard for me to even articulate how morally perverse this logic actually is. Nobody, and I mean no one, deserves to be killed without any due process or trial. If Brian Thompson actually did something evil or criminal with his company, that's something that should be investigated and he should be prosecuted for it with a trial. Or people could vote to change the healthcare policies in this country to change what those companies are allowed to do. Ironically, the admittedly deeply flawed healthcare system that everyone is so mad about is Obamacare. But vigilante executions without due process, that's the stuff of banana republics and failed states, not functioning liberal democracies. And as the commentator Robert Sterling explained on X, the implications of these beliefs and this perverse moral logic are truly, truly astounding. He wrote, "Are we allowed to assassinate the CEOs of other industries you view as harmful? For example, fossil fuels? Or is it open season only on insurance executives?" This is an excellent question. Who gets to decide which businesses are so bad that it's okay to gun people down in the street? And how is that not going to lead to the collapse of society as we know it? He continues, "Murdering Brian Thompson will do literally nothing to increase the availability or affordability of healthcare. Is it justified to shoot someone in the back simply out of frustration with the industry in which he works?" That's a good question. Is it literally okay in these people's minds to hurt people just to vent while accomplishing absolutely nothing? He asks, how far down the corporate hierarchy can we target? Are all employees of insurance companies valid targets for assassination, or only senior executives? What about mid-level executives, managers, actuaries, entry-level analysts, the custodians who clean their offices? Seriously, I want to know this. I want to see one of them articulate, like, where is this line of when it's okay to kill people for their jobs and when it's not? How do you possibly explain or justify that? Here's the other point that Robert raised that I think is truly an important question to ask. The largest insurance operator in the US is the federal government via Medicare. Is it therefore acceptable to kill political officials since Medicare also denies some claims? Seriously. The same logic all these young people use to somehow try to justify this murder of this healthcare CEO could be 100% applied to government politicians and administrators who run all the government programs. Is it just open season now? Are we a failed state where civilians can just assassinate politicians and we think that's fine? I certainly don't. But this is 41% of my age group. Now, here's a question that I would just love to ask one of these deeply morally confused young people or their champions online if I could actually get them to talk to me. What about a vigilante murdering the CEO of Planned Parenthood? I think most of these young people who overwhelmingly skew left would be horrified by that, and I would be too. That's not something I would ever think is okay or justifiable. But there's no thought process that one could use to justify the murder of an insurance CEO that couldn't also be used by some pro-life extremist to target and kill the CEO of Planned Parenthood. Have they not realized this inconsistency, or do they just not care? It's also worth asking, how the heck did we get here? To this perverse outcome where so many young people are just openly in support of terrorism. In part, I blame social media and the way it's just desensitized people towards violence. In part, I blame the kind of alarmism and fear-mongering that has convinced so many young people that things are so much worse than they actually are, which then pushes them towards these radical mindsets. And in part, I really do have to blame the political figures who they look to for guidance, the AOCs and Elizabeth Warrens of the world, the progressive politicians that young people flock to and view as thought leaders who have totally failed this basic test of moral clarity with their responses to this incident. They've all essentially said something like, violence is wrong, but I understand why people feel like this, or so on. Take a listen to what the two of them had to say.
This is not to say that an act of violence is is justified. But I think for anyone who is confused or shocked or appalled, they need to understand that people interpret and feel and experience denied claims as an act of violence against them.
Violence is never the answer. This guy gets a trial who's allegedly killed the CEO of United Health. But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
Somebody should ask AOC. If you think denying someone's insurance claim is murder, which is insane, oftentimes claims are denied to keep prices down because providers are charging too much or because the policy literally doesn't cover the thing they're claiming it for. Is it okay to assassinate politicians then? Because Medicaid and Medicare deny claims at high rates as well. And somebody should ask Elizabeth Warren if there's any other incident, maybe January 6th, for example, where she would see an act of political violence and ask, well, but we have to think about how people are feeling. No, political violence is wrong. But guys, to me, how we got here is almost a moot point. We are where we are, and we face a situation today where a plurality of young people in this country openly think is morally acceptable. All I can really do now is wonder whether a country where these people grow up in inherent positions of power can actually survive without tearing itself apart. I hope so, but I don't know at this point, honestly. But what do you guys think of this story and of this poll? Let me know in the comments below, and do hit that like button if you appreciated my commentary, and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet.